15 people died because somebody didn't check a number. Not a bomb, not a terrorist. A number. A little liquid level on a screen that nobody trusted, nobody verified, and nobody survived. Today we're walking through 10 times when routine turned into a crater. Buckle up. Picture the most boring morning of your life. That's how this started. It wasn't a hurricane, it wasn't sabotage. It was a plant startup. The industrial equivalent of turning your car key in the ignition. Something people do thousands of times without thinking. That was the problem. Nobody was thinking. The crew was firing up a unit that boiled gasoline components. To do that, they filled a tall tower with liquid. Simple. There was just one rule. Don't overfill it. And there was one gauge whose entire job in life was to tell them how full it was. That gauge was lying. It showed the tower was comfortably filling up, when in reality, it was drowning. The liquid had shot way past the safe line and kept climbing like a bathtub with the drain taped shut and the faucet stuck on full. Now here's where it gets stupid in that special industrial way. There were alarms. There are always alarms. A high-level alarm went off. Nobody blinked, because at this plant, alarms went off so often they basically become background music, the smoke detector with a dying battery of the refinery world. When everything screams, all the time, nothing screams. So they kept pumping. The tower filled completely. Then the liquid climbed into pipes that were never ever supposed to see liquid. Pressure spiked. A relief valve did exactly what it was designed to do. It dumped the excess, straight up, out of an open-topped vent stack, into the open air, a geyser of flammable hydrocarbon raining down like the world's worst lawn sprinkler. And then the final cosmic-level detail. Parked right next to this unit, because why not, were work trailers, full of people, contractors doing paperwork, eating lunch, existing. Somebody's decision to put temporary offices next to a fuel processing tower turned a leak into a body count. The vapor found an ignition source, and the explosion flattened the trailers. 15 dead. Over 180 hurt. The final mistake boiled down to one sentence. They restarted the unit without verifying the actual liquid level. They trusted a screen instead of reality, ignored the alarms because the alarms had cried wolf too many times, and parked human beings next to a bomb. Every single link in that chain was somebody's ordinary Tuesday. Sugar. The villain of this story is sugar. Not gas, not crude oil, not some exotic chemical with 40 syllables. The white stuff you put in your coffee. Here's a fact that sounds fake, but will absolutely ruin your day. Sugar burns. Worse than that, sugar dust explodes. Grind anything fine enough, throw it into the air, and it stops being food and starts being a fuel. Air weapon. Flour does it. Coffee creamer does it. And a sugar refinery makes packages and moves mountains of the stuff every single day, shedding a fine sweet powder into the air like industrial glitter. At Imperial Sugar, that powder had been settling for years. On beams, on rafters, on top of machinery, on every ledge and surface where nobody looked and nobody cleaned. Layers of it, thick as snow. In places human eyes rarely visited. The building was, functionally, coated on the inside with explosive. All it needed was a spark. One spark, that's the entire recipe. Somewhere in the plant, some piece of overheated equipment or a bit of stray electricity did what sparks do. The dust hanging in the air lit off in a flash. And here's the truly horrifying mechanic that makes dust explosions so deadly. The first small blast is barely the appetizer. Its real job is to shake the building. And when the building shakes, all those years of dust sitting quietly on the beams get thrown into the air at once. And now you've got a second cloud, bigger than the first. And it ignites too. Then a third. A rolling chain of explosions marching through the plant, each one kicking up fuel for the next. 14 people didn't come home. Dozens more were burned, some catastrophically. And the cause? It has the most unglamorous name in disaster history. Housekeeping failure. Not a villain, not a monster, not a freak of nature. Somebody was supposed to clean up, and for years, nobody did. You can explain the entire thing to a stranger in about 20 seconds, and their face will not believe you. Sugar killed 14 people because nobody swept. You already know the name. You've seen the burning rig, the black plume, the ocean on fire. But the movie trailer version misses the actual lesson, which is quieter and much scarier. Nobody did anything crazy. That's the point. There is no single villain here. No one guy pulled a lever labeled "cause massive disaster." Instead, there were about 10 smaller decisions, each one defensible on its own, each one shaving a little margin of safety. Each one made because the rig was behind schedule and running late, costs a fortune per day. Hurry, hurry, hurry. That was the mood. The crew was sealing up a well nearly 3 miles down at the bottom of the Gulf. Before you walk away from a well, you run a pressure test. You're basically asking the Earth, politely, are you going to stay put? They ran the test. The numbers came back weird. Genuinely alarming in hindsight. And instead of treating weird as stop everything, they talked themselves into a story where the numbers were fine. They wanted the good answer, so they found a way to read the bad answer as good. Human beings are extremely gifted at this, and it kills them constantly. Meanwhile, the last line of defense, the blowout preventer, the giant safety valve at the seafloor whose entire purpose is to slam a well shut in an emergency, had issues. A dead battery here, a bent component there. The one thing designed to save everyone if all else failed was itself not fully working. Nobody knew because nobody had verified. So the Earth answered the pressure test its own way. Oil and gas came screaming up the pipe, hit the rig, found a spark, and turned a floating drilling platform into a fireball. Visible for miles, 11 people died. The well then vomited crude into the Gulf for months. The lesson gets carved on the tombstone of the whole industry. No single mistake killed them. It took about 10. Pull any one of those 10 out of the chain, and everybody lives. That's what makes it terrifying. There was no dramatic moment to catch. Just a slow pile of, probably fine. This one is the patron saint of the phrase, "it's just temporary." A chemical plant in England was cooking cyclohexane, a lovely liquid that is essentially gasoline's angrier cousin, kept hot and under pressure. The process ran through a row of 6 big reactors, connected in a line, liquid flowing from one to the next through short sections of pipe. Then one of the reactors cracked, developed a leak. Now, the sensible move is to shut down, fix the reactor, and restart. But shutting down costs money and time, and the plant wanted to keep running. So somebody had a bright idea. Just skip the broken reactor, route the liquid around it. Take reactor 5 out of the lineup and connect reactor 4 straight to reactor 6 with a bypass pipe. Fine in principle, except the 2 reactors weren't lined up neatly, and the pipe that connected them had to be a different, larger diameter with a couple of bends to make the geometry work. A chunky, dog-legged, jury-rigged section of pipe. And here is the sentence that killed 28 people. Nobody did the math. No engineer sat down and calculated whether that improvised pipe could handle the pressure, the temperature, the forces trying to shove it apart. They eyeballed it. They supported it on scaffolding. Literal scaffolding, the stuff you stand on to paint a wall, holding up a pipe full of superheated pressurized fuel. It held for a couple of months. Then the forces won. The jury-rigged pipe tore loose, and 30 to 50 tons of cyclohexane escaped in seconds, flashing into an enormous vapor cloud that drifted across the site and found an ignition source. The explosion was so violent it leveled the plant and damaged buildings for miles around. 28 people died, most of them in the control room. It happened on a weekend, which is the only reason the number wasn't far higher. The whole catastrophe traces back to a temporary fix that skipped the one boring step, the calculation. Because doing it properly would have slowed things down. Temporary solutions have a nasty habit of becoming permanent. Sometimes permanent means forever. Small town in Texas, a fertilizer storage and distribution facility, the kind of unremarkable building you drive past 1,000 times without a second glance. Inside it set a large quantity of ammonium nitrate, a common farm fertilizer that has one very inconvenient personality trait. Under the right conditions, it doesn't just burn, it detonates. This is the same basic material used in mining explosives and historically in some of the worst bombs ever built. And it was being stored in bulk in a wooden building in the middle of a community. One evening, a fire started at the facility. The exact ignition is its own long story, but the fire itself, at first, was just a fire. The local volunteer firefighters responded like they would to any structure blaze. They rolled up, they aimed their hoses, they did their jobs. What almost none of them fully understood was what that building actually contained and what heat does to a giant pile of ammonium nitrate. They couldn't get the fire under control, and as it burned, it cooked the stockpile. There's a window of time where you're not fighting a fire anymore, you're standing next to a countdown that nobody set, and nobody can see. Then it went off. The blast was so enormous it registered as a small earthquake. It carved a crater into the ground, obliterated the facility, and flattened homes, an apartment complex, a school, and a nursing home nearby. 15 people died, and most of them were first responders, the firefighters who ran toward the danger without knowing they were standing on top of the world's largest sparkler. The mistake underneath it all: storing an enormous amount of a detonating material improperly, with poor separation, in a wooden building close to where people lived and slept. The town had essentially grown up around a bomb, and nobody had drawn a line that said, not here, not this much. Not like this. This is the one that plays out like a horror movie, where the audience is screaming, "Don't go in there," and everybody goes in there. At a chemical plant in Texas, workers were dealing with methyl mercaptan, a gas so foul-smelling it's the stuff they add to natural gas, so you can smell a leak. But smelling bad is the least of its problems. It's toxic, and critically, it's heavier than air. That single physical fact is the whole tragedy. Heavier than air means it doesn't drift up and away like you'd hope. It sinks. It pools. It fills a room from the floor up like invisible poisonous water. Workers opened up part of the system, and the gas began accumulating in an enclosed space. One worker went down, overcome, collapsed. And here's where human decency becomes a death trap. A co-worker saw them fall and did the most natural, most human thing in the world. Rushed in to help, and went down too. Then another person came to help those two, and went down. And another. This has a clinical name in the safety world because it happens again and again and again. Multiple rescuer fatalities. The gas doesn't announce itself. There's no visible cloud, no wall of flame. The room looks completely normal. It just happens to be full of something that switches your body off. Each person who ran in to save a friend walked into the exact same invisible pool and met the exact same end. Because nobody knew, or nobody stopped to check, that the air itself had become the killer. 4 people died, not from an explosion, not from fire. From walking into a room, one at a time, to help the person who'd walked in before them. The instinct that makes us human, you see someone fall, you run to them, is precisely the instinct that gas like this weaponizes. Let's talk about the most innocent killer on this entire list: nitrogen. The gas that makes up most of the air you're breathing right now. 78% of every breath. Completely harmless, non-toxic. Doesn't burn. And it can kill an entire room in under a minute without anyone realizing they're in danger. Here's the trick. Nitrogen isn't poisonous. It just isn't oxygen. Flood a space with it, and it shoves the oxygen out of the way. Your body has no alarm for this. You have no sensor for not enough oxygen. You feel no burning, no choking, no smell, no warning. You just get quietly stupid, then dizzy. Then you're on the floor, and you never understood why. At a poultry processing plant in Georgia, they recently installed a new liquid nitrogen system, the ultra-cold liquid used for flash freezing food. During operation, it leaked. Liquid nitrogen boils into a huge volume of gas the instant it warms up, so even a modest leak floods a space fast. The oxygen got pushed out, and workers started dropping. No smell to warn them, no color to see, no taste. Just workers losing consciousness with zero understanding of the cause. And, again, co-workers rushing in to help and joining them on the floor. 6 people died in a room that to any human sense looked and felt completely fine. The mistake was upstream and boring, the way these always are. A newly installed system that wasn't properly set up, wasn't adequately checked, and had no reliable safeguards to catch a leak of a gas that gives you no natural warning whatsoever. They'd bolted in a silent, invisible, odorless killer and trusted it to behave. And think about how ordinary this gas is. It's not some exotic chemical locked in a vault. It's the boring majority of the sky, which is exactly why it slips past every instinct you have. Your brain has spent your entire life treating nitrogen as background, as nothing, as the stuff that isn't trying to kill you. So when a room quietly fills with it, no ancient survival reflex kicks in. There's no held breath, no gag, no flinch. You'd walk into that room whistling. That's the whole horror of it. The deadliest thing here wasn't rare or dramatic. It was the most common gas on the planet, in the wrong place with nobody watching the oxygen level. If case 2 was sugar, this is its evil twin. Grain. And if the sugar plant makes you think, well, maybe they just didn't know, this one removes that excuse entirely. A corn milling plant in Wisconsin. Milling grain, like refining sugar, produces enormous quantities of fine dust. And grain dust, exactly like sugar dust, is explosive when it hangs in the air. Same physics, same danger, same recipe. Fine fuel plus oxygen plus 1 spark equals a building trying to become a bomb. And just like the sugar plant, the dust here had been building up over the years, coating the insides of the facility in a fine explosive layer. This is where the story turns from tragic to infuriating. This wasn't a secret. The dangers of grain dust are some of the oldest, most documented, most drilled into your skull hazards in the entire industry, and regulators had noticed. The plant had been inspected and cited by safety authorities multiple times over the dust problem. They were told, officially, on paper, more than once, the problems weren't fixed. Not properly, not permanently. The dust stayed. So the story writes its own ending, the same ending as always. A spark found the dust. The first blast shook the building, threw more dust into the air, and set off the chain, that rolling series of explosions marching through the plant, each blast feeding the next. 5 workers died. More were injured. The special sting of this one is that nobody can hide behind "we didn't know it was dangerous." They knew. It was written down. Someone with a badge came out and said, "Fix this," repeatedly, and the fix never came. 5 people died of a hazard that had a paper trail. And this is the pattern that should genuinely make your skin crawl. Because it's not unique to one plant. Grain dust explosions aren't some cutting-edge mystery that engineers are still puzzling over. Farmers have been dying in grain elevators for over a century. The physics is in every training manual. The fix is not exotic. It's cleaning, ventilation, and equipment that doesn't throw sparks into a fuel cloud. None of that is expensive genius. It's just work. Tedious, unglamorous, never finished work that produces nothing you can put on a spreadsheet and sell. So it slides down the priority list, quarter after quarter, until the dust does the math for you. The citations were basically letters from the future warning exactly how everyone would die. Nobody opened them in time. Some disasters happened because someone did something reckless on purpose. This one happened because of a cleaning procedure that, at the time, was considered totally normal. A brand new power plant in Connecticut was getting ready to come online. Before you fire up gas pipes, you want them clean, no debris, no junk left over from construction rattling around inside. And the method they used to clean the gas lines was called a gas blow. The idea is straightforward. You blast high-pressure natural gas through the pipes to scour out any debris and vent it away. Use the fuel itself as the cleaning agent. Read that again. Their plan to clean the pipes was to shove enormous volumes of natural gas, the same natural gas whose entire purpose is to burn, through the system and out into the surrounding area. Outdoors, indoors, wherever it went, And natural gas doesn't politely leave. It's lighter than air in the open, but it collects, it lingers, it pools in and around structures, filling the space with an invisible flammable cloud. So now you've got a construction site, full of workers, full of equipment, full of the ordinary sparks and ignition sources that exist anywhere people are building things. Slowly marinating in vented natural gas. It's the kind of setup where you don't ask if it'll ignite. You ask when. It ignited. The explosion tore through the plant, killed 6 workers, injured dozens, and was felt for miles around. The blast was powerful enough to damage buildings well beyond the site. And here's the part that tells you how normalized the madness was. After this, the United States changed the rules. Deliberately venting flammable gas to clean pipes near people got recognized for the obviously insane practice it was. And the standards were rewritten. 6 people had to die for the industry to admit that cleaning pipes with a fuel air bomb was a bad idea. We've saved the worst for last. This is the one they teach in every safety course on Earth. The disaster whose name became shorthand for an entire category of failure. 167 people died on a burning platform in the middle of the North Sea. And it started with a piece of paperwork nobody read. Piper Alpha was an oil and gas platform, a self-contained metal island crawling with hundreds of workers, sitting on top of the very thing that would kill them. The tragedy began with something almost laughably routine. A pump needed maintenance, so it was shut down and taken out of service, and while it was open, a critical safety valve was removed for the work. Standard stuff. To keep everyone straight, they used a permit-to-work system, a formal paper trail where you log that a machine is out of commission and unsafe to start. Here is the fatal crack. The maintenance wasn't finished by the end of the shift. The pump sat there, missing its safety valve, effectively an open pipe. The permit recording this was filed, but it lived in a separate place from the permits the next shift was actually looking at. Shift change came. The new crew took over, and they did not know that this particular pump was a death trap with a hole where a valve should be. Then the other pump, the one still in service, failed. No problem, the crew thought. We've got a backup. Let's switch on the spare, and they turned on the pump that was missing its safety valve. Gas poured out of the opening. It found ignition almost immediately. The first explosion was only the beginning. The fire spread to where the platform received oil and gas from other connected platforms. And those other platforms, not understanding how bad it was, kept pumping fuel toward the inferno. The whole structure became a torch. Many of the men retreated to the accommodation block to wait for rescue, following the standard procedure, and were trapped there by smoke and heat. Some survived only by ignoring the rules and jumping dozens of meters into a freezing, burning sea. 167 dead. The root cause is the most famous failure of communication in industrial history. The permit-to-work system broke down. One shift knew the pump was unsafe. The next shift didn't. That single gap in a paper trail, a message that never made it from one crew to the next, turned a routine maintenance job into the deadliest offshore disaster. Notice what killed these people. Not evil, not bad luck. A skipped calculation, an unread permit, a floor nobody swept. 10 times, the disaster was already built into the day. Quiet, boring, and completely preventable. The scariest word in any of these stories isn't explosion. It's routine.